Hey friends, I'm glad that yesterday was a little relaxing, calm, tired, restful, chill, because today is not going to be those things. So Scott Sinak, one of these people who gets paid to preach for giant companies, whatever helps them exploit people, has been getting another video making the rounds about how the biggest mistake millennials make is job hopping, and what, there's words I don't use on my channel, because I like to try to keep things family friendly. What a dude who doesn't know anything he's talking about. So today, we're going to talk concretely about examples of how and why job hopping actually makes a lot of sense for most people in our generation. Now, I say our generation. Technically, I'm near the cutoff line where most people put millennial. I'm also kind of straddle pretty close to Gen Z, Gen X, not Gen Z, Gen X. But obviously, I work with lots of people who are definitely in the millennial bracket, whoever defines it, and including some who are Gen Z. So let's talk about the realities of the landscape that we work in. I'm going to use some concrete examples. These aren't just my opinions of like people should or shouldn't. It's here's stuff I've seen that has consistently held true when I run it by other people in their studio experiences, their life experiences. Now, that said, obviously I'm very much game development industry connected. That's the world I live in. That said, it's kind of a good microcosm for lots of other things because it touches tech industry, touches creative industries, touches lots of other businesses. Now, the deal is my very first summer at a giant game studio, who will not be named here, but it's not hard to look up. They, all across the code, there was comments from someone who had done a lot of the work. And I was like, whoa, this person seems pretty sharp. Are they still around? They said, no, he actually left and went to work for a competitor. So he's now working on a competitor's games. And I was like, all right, well, you know, chalk it up to careers and industry and life. And who knows what he didn't like around there or vice versa. Whatever. People's careers shuffle around. It's games, right? Next summer, I'm back there again, and he's back now as the boss, the direct boss of people who used to be his coworkers and peers. For having left the company for a year, worked at the competitor, and come back. And now I went to HR, and I was like, look, I'm new here. So this is a legitimate question, not as loaded as it sounds, but seems a little fishy to not promote within from people who were loyal to the company, but instead to reward someone going to a competitor for a year. And, you know, the person hand waved around like, well, outside experience is really valuable. It brings an outside perspective. You know, had to have a certain level of caliber of skill set to have got himself over there. And then they made a strong case to bring him back. And this was one of my first signs that, reward loyalty isn't a thing anymore, right? I mean, because my dad was still in the generation of, he worked at the same company now probably 30 plus years. And this isn't a fault of him. This is the world was different when he was coming out of college than it is when I was coming out of college, which granted, I came out like 2007, so while the economy was exploding, that's his whole separate bag of beans. Clearly, this has got me on edge. So here's the deal. Around the same time, one of the largest divisions in that company needed a new head of that division. So I'm kind of curious to know what's going on over there, and half none of my business, half just curiosity. But they bring in an outside person for it. Now, that mega profitable division of that company has been in business for 20, 30 years. With executives and business people and managers at all across the spectrum over in that division. And so again, this time I actually have to go over the HR, because the HR here is like our local studio, to literally the top of HR within the company. Had a chance to talk to him, and I said, hey, I'm just trying to understand. Well, again, I'm new here, so sponge me up. And I'm like, why wasn't one of those people who've been at this company for 20, 25 years promoted to be the head of that division when they know the people, they're connected to people there like and trust and respect them? Why instead was someone from outside the company brought in to be the head of that division? And the guy said something that I think was supposed to reassure me, but actually was my red flashing light to get the heck out of there. He said, Chris, if you knew these people like I do, and I know all those people, I know all these 20, 25-year veterans, I also know this outside guy. If you know those people like I do, you would know that this outside person is the best fit. And I'm like, yikes, what a severe burn you just did on the people who had spent 20, 25 years giving their lives to this company. Holy smokes. So once again, didn't promote from within, promoted from outside. And then the more I've got friends who are, because I'm in LA, my wife's in advertising industry. She's got lots of friends of other agencies and at meetups out here through the Forbes list and otherwise. I meet people in other industries. And quite often it's the case that people who stick around at the same company, their salaries don't grow by very much. The people who job hop, their salaries can go up considerably each time for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, they got to make a certain case that it's worth them making the move. They've got to be out there hustling in terms of updating their portfolio, their resume, figuring out how to sell and brand and commit themselves and showcase their work and prove their value. It's even the case that my friends who are in academia, which we like to imagine, at least from the outside, isn't quite the Shark Tank that is the business world. I don't want to be too specific. One of my advisors, that doesn't narrow down too bad. One of my advisors was trying to get a raise at their university, and the way they did this is a common practice in industry and a lot of fields too, which was basically to try to get another job somewhere else that would say they'd pay them more to go back and get a counteroffer from the university they were already at. This is, again, like a public university, right? This is not just some sort of behind-the-scenes, private industry, corporate stuff. This is in academia this goes on. Now, ultimately, this person decided to change schools because the deal was so much better, and the other university wouldn't match it, and so their answer was, goodbye, y'all. Now, this is frustrating for a variety of reasons, right? This is deeply unfair to people who are loyal and enjoy their jobs and enjoy the company, enjoy the people that they work with. This is deeply unfair to people who, for a variety of reasons, monetary, family, other things, can't as easily relocate, locked into a really long-term lease or whatever. So there's a huge downside, and this, of course, feeds back into this impression that the industry, or at least the industries I'm familiar with, are overwhelmingly dominated by young people shuffling around, and that it gets increasingly hard as they're later in life, with more roots, with a house, with a family, and kids that are in school, etc., to be able to make these kind of relocations that result in the salary increase, the promotion, even just the respect around the company. Because one of the dynamics that's happened, and I've seen this now in let's say a couple of peers have shared these stories with me, where they started entry level at a place, and until they picked up their bags and moved somewhere else, even when they got the official role in the team, even when they got the official title, even when they got the pay increase of being onboarded out of entry level into a kind of real position on the org chart, they still were kind of seen by their peers as, they're more green here. Because they always still thought of that person as an intern. They always still thought of that person as entry level. Not until they picked up and went somewhere else were they seen as equals, were they treated as peers, because all they'd ever seen them as was level 2 software engineer, project manager who had never been known as the assistant running around helping out. And that's just this weird social dynamic. I don't know what the easy answer to that is. There may not be one. But it's a thing of, once again, job hopping has its benefits for those who can pull it off. For those who can't, unfortunately, there are difficult things to navigate around that. But it's why it gets me so riled up, as you're hearing and seeing today, when someone like Sinek, who goes around getting paid yachts full of money to tell companies whatever they want employees to be sold to, they can get exploited. This also feeds into abusive workplaces, into hostile work environments. There's a great article some years ago, I think it was by a Canadian business blog, site, periodical, about that a lot of millennials, they might be even perceived as fragile, when really what's going on is that they just don't tolerate abusive workplaces anymore in a way the generation before us accepted as normal or acceptable. That crying in the workplace is a thing that somehow people used to see as a rite of passage, as a necessary, as a normal part of working for bosses and leaders. I think to a great extent, and pardon me for going there, this also has a big, let's say, insight into what's going on with the political divide between what some people regard as, oh, that person's a leader. That person, they could be my boss, with their abusive bullying behavior. Whereas another generation of folks disproportionately look at that same behavior and say, what an unacceptable joke of a human being who would not make it a day in a modern, acceptable workplace. But there's this very real effect of when people say, well, you got to stick to it, you got to stick around. That's deeply, deeply, deeply poisonous and toxic, because it plays into these workplaces that aren't acceptable, that have bosses that make unreasonable demands, that treat their workers unfairly, to basically say, but you're stuck here, and you have to put up with whatever we do and however we say to do it, because what else are you going to do? You want a job hopping on your resume? You want to hurt your chances somewhere else? And again, that's such just nonsense. That's not the reality. I had a discussion earlier today with a fellow who had just signed, just agreed to take a job, but he still has another interview lined up, and he's trying to decide, should he still do that interview? Does it feel ethical? And a point my dad made to me when I was first getting into these gigs, and I still worked for other people, was that that company, even though we had agreed, here's what I was doing next summer, or whatever, these companies that lay off hundreds of people in the blink of an eye without thinking twice about it, would not for a moment hesitate to say, actually, business circumstances have changed, this position is no longer open to you. Wouldn't think twice about it, wouldn't accept any penalties, wouldn't have any sort of problem with it, would just be like, sorry, job doesn't exist, good luck to you out there. And that we owe exactly the same treatment to the companies as they present to us. That if a better opportunity arises for you in the one life you have to live, Be open to it. And if nothing else, I encourage this person, take that interview, hear what they have to say, get to know these people across the table. It might expose you to some valuable practice and insights into future interview questions, even if you don't wind up at that gig. It might lead to some sort of remote part-time contracting, potentially. It might lead to, any given time, a lot of recruiters wind up recruiters somewhere else in the future, some years down the line. You remember this positive interaction you had. Just do the interview. Can't hurt. And if it really beats the heck out of the thing you're doing now, see if you can work out plans so, find your way over there one way or the other. But anyway, it frustrates me to no end because it perpetuates workplace abuses. It perpetuates people having these ideas that rob them of some of the best career years of their life or some of their most efficient early pivots and opportunities. And a lot of these things add up cumulatively. These are the same sort of things that lead to, I'm going to ramble on to something that's probably going to be my discussion for tomorrow's video. These huge disparities where someone's starting salary in their first job can become the anchoring point that over the years adds up to what constitutes a raise, what constitutes a promotion, what constitutes a next position that they see as reasonable at their level. And these differences in these things where people will linger at a job 5-10 years and not see a promotion, not see a raise, or only the bare minimum, contributes to, in the long haul, an enormous difference in opportunities and options, which, while we're having a half political rambling in the States, affect medical care, educational opportunities, access to low and non-paying career stages, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I think I've kind of got it off my chest a little bit. Thanks for hearing me out. Obviously, my energy today is very different than yesterday because, man, videos like that. Now, part of it, they get you right. They get you to talk about it, and that helps them in their visibility. So that's all I'm going to say about it for today. Tomorrow, we'll talk about something else more positive. I'll probably calm back down. Thanks for hearing me out today.